This video has been a long time coming.
Fool me once and it's shame on me, but you know you better tread carefully. Fool me twice, I'm your enemy. I'm your enemy. Run, you better run. Vendetta, run, you better. Vendetta.
Little bit of a different video today. I do feel like it's a kind of controversial topic to talk about, but it is something that we need to talk about. I'm sure most of you have already watched my Booktube is problematic videos where I kind of share the level of bullshit that I think is within the Booktube community. And a lot of that, I believe, is the amount that these girls are reading, how fast they are reading, or how much they are actually digesting from what they are reading and from what they are taking in. I know that the term fake reader girl is pretty outdated, but I think it's just as prevalent today. Not so much the hashtag, but the fact that people tend to flex more than what is reality. But in this video, I didn't really want to talk about the superficiality of Booktube. I actually wanted to talk about the real problems that readers face after reading so much, digesting so much, taking in so much, and especially with the pressures from online, from social media. And if you are a part of the Booktube community, within the community itself, I tend to see a lot of new faces. Like, people tend to switch in and out. There are a few constants within the community that haven't really changed over the past years, but I think there is a reason behind the scenes of why so many girls tend to either disappear or they change the material up. Aside from YouTube fatigue, which is a real thing, I tend to fight the same battles as anyone else when it comes to debating whether or not I want to keep my channel, whether or not I want to continue to work to put forth material, because you tend to hit burnout, because you tend to get tired of it, because it's like writing, it's like anything else, it's like any kind of relationship, hobby, anything that you want to pursue, you're going to hit that dead spot. You're going to hit that spot where you feel like you're just pushing a boulder up the hill and you can't see the top and there's no end in sight, but you keep remembering how much you once loved it and how much you felt for it before. And even though your perception of it has changed, and even though you are tired, you keep pushing and you keep pushing and you keep moving forward because you want that old love back. And I'm here to tell you, you're never going to get it back. As a writer, my relationship with my writing has changed drastically over the years. I am not the writer that I was 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. The love that I have for my stories, the love that I have for writing is constantly shifting. When I was a kid, I would just write stories for the fun of it because I love telling stories. I love living in my own fantasies, and I was fine with the simple things. Fast forward to when I finally started drafting my books, I discovered the love of rewriting. I discovered the love of being able to change and shift and reform these worlds, relive these experiences, but it's like times 10 because you're adding details, you're adding characters, you're starting to see it in a new light, and it's ever shifting, and it's exciting. The rewriting for me is probably my favorite part of the process because I keep adding things, and even though you might be taking some things out, it's the way that it shifts, that it's just like rediscovering that love, but in a better, deeper, stronger light. Editing is hell. It's a whole other story. Right around the time I discovered my love for rewriting, I also discovered the hatred that I have for editing. But it's not just the writing process that has changed over the years, it's the motivations, it's the ideas. It's a different feeling, it's a different sort of happiness. Because when I have ideas now, it's not just for the sake of telling a story, it's about messages, it's about theming, it's about subtext, it's about how to layer the story with all these different elements to come together and have a new piece. And it's a lot harder and it's a lot more work, but it's a completely different kind of fascination and a completely different relationship and love than what I had for it 10 years ago or 20 years ago. And I know that this is not the end goal for me. I'm sure that my love for writing will change again in 5-10 years, because that's what it means to grow. That's what it means to become a different person, to have different likes, and to seek out more from the relationship than just what was what was before than just a superficial level. For YouTube, I'm kind of hoping it's the same thing. I'm noticing that my channel is shifting, and my desire for my channel has shifted drastically than when I started 3 years ago. 3 years ago, I wanted to come up here and just shit talk AuthorTube and Booktube, and now it's to the point where I've gained a sense of maturity and more insight to be able to recognize just how childish and selfish some of my previous motivations were, and wanting my channel to be more professional, to be more mature, to be the voice that I know people want to hear and people want to be represented, but also to have new insight for. I think that's kind of my goal now, instead of just getting on here and just shit talking people. Reading is kind of a constant. The act of reading, the act of just opening a book and kind of melting into that world. The only real growth that you can get from that is if you're switching genres, if you're switching writing styles, if you're trying to challenge yourself in other areas that will promote personal growth and kind of help you re-experience and rediscover those things that you once loved about reading. Because the sad truth is, readers get tired of reading. I used to be an avid reader. I loved books. I was obsessed with books since I was a little girl. I can remember the first time I saw a book was I think I was in kindergarten, and I remember seeing this first grader, and they would have the pretty literature book, and I remember it being this rich, beautiful emerald green cover, and it just was this beautiful sheen with like an illustration over the cover of it. And I remember them flipping through the pages, and I was just staring at the book. I was so envious. I wanted it. I couldn't even read. I couldn't even understand what was going on, but I couldn't wait to learn. And then after that, they couldn't keep me out of the school library. They couldn't keep me, away from books. I would be rushing through my schoolwork just so that I could pull out a book and just read it. And then when I was pulled out of school to be homeschooled, my reading was kind of limited. Because I didn't have a lot of books. I didn't have access to a public library because we kind of lived far away, and other issues. So, I was limited to basically asking for books on my birthday and Christmas. When I finally got my first job, and I started buying every single book that looked interesting to me in every genre by any author. It did not matter. And I still read a lot at this point. Like, I was really, really into the dystopian romances. Wither by Lauren DeStefano was one of my favorite books. The Crossed series was one of my favorite series. The Hunger Games was one of my favorite series. Divergent, Maze Runner, all of that. I was obsessed with it, and I read a lot. However, I noticed that the more I worked, the less time I had to read. So I would kind of be just collecting these books over time. And I'm sure you've been able to see my bookshelves behind me kind of like morph every now and then. Like, they'll be either different colors, different genres, or just kind of thrown together like they are now because I haven't gotten a chance to organize it. Sad truth is, I don't have as much time to read. I haven't had as much time to read because I've been working so much, probably for the last 5 to 6 years, because of other issues coming up, and I kind of fell by the wayside. So I have all of these books. I have a massive library of literature to get through, and I kept telling myself, one day when you have the time, you'll be able to just open a book and spend the entire day reading it. One day you'll be able to read as much as you can. And I finally decided that that day was never going to come. So I decided to make my way through my library. Unfortunately, I don't feel the same way that I once did about the books that I have now. It really happened because I was starting to kind of comb through my library. I was starting to get rid of either outdated books that I knew I wasn't going to be interested in, because I knew my tastes were going to change anyways. Donating books by the bag, by the box. A lot of books that I'm trying to get rid of to just unload so I can shrink my library down to my particular tastes now. I had spent all of those years collecting books because I love to read. Like a chipmunk storing nuts for the winter, I was just waiting for the right moment. And I think that moment has passed. And I'm not even making it halfway through the book. It doesn't matter if it's a modern book that I was interested in, because I try to mix it up. It doesn't matter if it's a different genre. It doesn't matter if it's a book that I once loved. I have no desire to read any of these stories anymore. They're not interesting to me anymore. I went through this dry phase when I was writing as well. I went through a phase, especially after the 11-year project, I kind of like starved myself because I wasn't allowing myself to experience new things. I was just obsessively editing the same story over and over and over, to the point where it was really making me reconsider even continuing as a writer. I started to really hate writing. I dreaded opening my computer every morning. It wasn't until I decided to shelve it again for like the 5th time, I allowed myself to experience new things through writing, that I rediscovered my love for writing. I rediscovered the new genre that I want to write. However, the genre that I am writing is very rare. I'm trying to break that habit of collecting these books that are just going to sit on my shelf, and then by the time I finally get to reading them, I am no longer interested. It's incredibly frustrating because I never thought that I would actually outgrow the stories that I liked, because I always try to be open-minded. I always try to have an interest in every kind of genre and every kind of field, but I think the simple truth is that I've outgrown it. With the Booktube community, I think a lot of it is that they have either outgrown it or they are just flat out burnt out because they are reading so much of the same thing. Especially if they're consuming so much all at once, you're going to get tired of it after a while. And I think that there is this kind of underlying shame and embarrassment in realizing that you no longer love reading. You no longer care as much about other people's books. You might have stopped caring about the community. You might have stopped caring about your videos or about the books that you once loved, and it's heartbreaking to fall out of love with reading like that, because you just, especially when you have so much of your identity tied to that, you just don't know what to do. You don't know where to go from there. You might feel a little lost. You might feel like you're floundering. And I think that that's why it's not really talked about, is because there's no real direction to go. Personally, I think that the truth of the matter is you've outgrown it or you've burnt out. The answer could be as simple as taking a break, switching genres, or just adopting a different hobby. And I think it's okay to realize that that's what you want to do. I think it's more harmful to hold yourself back doing something that you no longer love, or continuing to buy books that you're just going to shelve and then wake up to realize one day that that love that you once had for it has either gone away or it has never returned. I started reading nonfiction lately, and actually enjoying it, which is a genre I never thought I would even be interested in, because I love stories. But it's just so much the same these days, and it's so predictable, and it's so soap opera-y and melodramatic, and I'm bored. I'm bored with all of it, and even the stuff that I loved once, I can't do it anymore. So I just kind of listened to myself, and I listened to my gut, and I started reading more nonfiction. I started investing more in actually learning rather than kind of letting myself drown in somebody else's fantasy. And simultaneously, it's actually helping my writing, because I feel more comfortable in the fact that I can stand out, and I feel more comfortable in the fact that I don't have to compare myself in my writing to these other writers and their stories, because my stuff, I feel like, is different enough, and it feels different enough for me to be able to delve into it without feeling tied back and held back to what has been done before. There's safety and predictability, but there's only so much to go around. The only book that I've really enjoyed in the last 3 years, enough to say that I thoroughly enjoyed it without making it a 5-star book, would be The Gracier. I think I overhyped it in my review because it really is a simplistic story, but it was a fact that it was different, and I think it was very risky, and I think that's why it was popular. I think more different things are about to spring up into view. A lot of writers are feeling trapped, and they're feeling held back because we're constantly being told that we need to be predictable, we need to put out the stuff that people want to read, and we need to write for the market. That whole side of writing is still writing, but for me, it kind of invalidates what it means to actually be an art form. An art form is not about the money. It's not about the sales. It's not about the numbers. Letting it be an art form is more about true expression. It's more about inner expression and being able to be real with yourself as well as with others, because writing is a very, very intimate thing. And I think that's another reason a lot of people are kind of scared to dive too deep into it, because it does expose you. It exposes your personalities, it exposes your flaws, it exposes your mindset. I can't tell you the number of self-published writers on AuthorTube that I've read that you can really tell what the person is like just by the writing, and it's Sometimes it's kind of disgusting, which makes me a little nervous putting my stuff out there because I know that it's going to be the same kind of reception. People are not always going to like you. People are not always going to like your writing. That's just something you have to expect. The only thing that I can say is if you feel like you're coming to this point and you feel like you're falling out of love with writing or reading, I think before you give up on it, you should explore the reasons why and either let yourself take a break or try a different avenue, because it could be that you're tired and it just could be that you're ready to move on and you're ready to accept the next phase in this relationship. And if you have stopped loving reading altogether and you want to move on to other things, that is perfectly normal. It's not something to be ashamed of, and I do think that getting too involved with the Booktube community can be harmful in the aspect that if you're not as avid a reader and you're not reading a lot of the same stuff, it kind of kicks you out of their club. But I don't think that you should let peer pressure keep you tied to something that you might eventually come to hate. It's not healthy for you, and it doesn't have to be like that. So yeah, kind of a simple video. I'm still working on the politics in AuthorTube. I'm not gonna lie, I did not get much editing done, unfortunately, this week because my work, I have been putting in a lot of overtime, and I'm exhausted. I didn't get a day off for 10 days, and then I had to work 7 days straight to get finally this weekend so I can put out this video. And I'm trying to rework another type of routine to cut back on the writing and put more editing in, because otherwise I'm never going to get it done. However, I will be continuing to put out some more of these talking points because I think that both communities could move on to better things if we actually opened ourselves up a little bit and kind of admitted to ourselves that it's time. It's time to move on. So, all right, I will see you guys in my next video.